You're looking at Ricki Starr, one of the newest in the wrestling game, and he's getting quite a ribbing from the crowd. Here's Manny Weiss to give the official introduction. He's loosening up now, I think.
From Dodge City, Kansas, the Madison Square Garden sensation, weighing 190, Ricki Starr.
And it's curtain time. There goes the bell. Ricki makes his big entrance, stage center. Ricki gets things started off with a bang.
In the rough, hard-hitting world of 1950s professional wrestling, the last thing anyone expected to see was a ballet dancer. The men who stepped into the ring were expected to fight like gladiators, powerful, relentless, and merciless. But in the middle of this violent spectacle, one wrestler shattered every expectation. Instead of charging at his opponents with clenched fists, Ricki Starr glided across the canvas with the grace of a performer on a theater stage. Known as the Ballet Dancer, Starr blended the elegance of classical ballet with the chaos of professional wrestling. Starr turned pirouettes, spins, and leaps into weapons that humiliated and infuriated the tough men who faced him. At a time when wrestling celebrated toughness above all else, Starr proved that finesse, creativity, and showmanship could be just as devastating, making him one of the most unusual and unforgettable personalities of wrestling's early television era. Before he ever stepped into a wrestling ring as Ricki Starr, the man behind the gimmick was Bernard Herrmann, a tough kid from St. Louis. Born in 1931, Herrmann grew up like many young men with dreams of proving themselves. He briefly left school in 1949 and traveled to the Kansas wheat fields, working long days so he could save enough money to chase a different ambition, training as a boxer at the famous Stillman's Gym in New York City. After sparring with serious boxing professionals, including future middleweight champion Rocky Graziano, the undersized Herrmann realized that boxing might not be his path to success, and he returned home to Missouri. Back in St. Louis, Herrmann began to make a name for himself as a talented amateur wrestler. Despite his relatively small size, he developed a reputation as a tough competitor and an all-around athlete. He competed at the AAU National Championships for 3 consecutive years, finishing 4th in 1950 and improving to 3rd place in 1951 in the 175-pound division. Yet even as he established himself on the mat, Herrmann was already exploring something far more unusual for a young wrestler. In 1951, he began studying ballet on a scholarship at the Lala Bauman School of Dance in St. Louis. Herrmann immersed himself in a demanding routine that could last 5 or 6 hours a night. A former ballet classmate later recalled that Herrmann approached ballet with the intensity of an athlete and suspected that the future wrestler may have had a larger plan in mind. Even then, it seemed possible that Herrmann was using ballet not as an end goal, but as a stepping stone towards something else, something that would eventually make him one of the most unusual performers professional wrestling had ever seen. Breaking into professional wrestling proved far more difficult than Herrmann expected. He later recalled trying unsuccessfully to get matches around St. Louis, managing to secure only a single bout. His father, Joe Herrmann, a former wrestling referee, even attempted to persuade legendary St. Louis promoter Sam Muchnick to give the undersized local wrestler a chance, but Muchnick remained unconvinced. With opportunities drying up at home, Herrmann decided to head south to Texas in search of work. Like many young wrestlers of the era, he paid his dues working on undercards, competing in small matches that rarely drew much attention. But in 1954, Herrmann decided to try something different, something that would change his career forever. Drawing on his ballet training, he experimented with blending dance into his wrestling routine. In Amarillo, Texas, he debuted the new persona that would soon make him famous. Wearing purple ballet slippers and a matching leotard, he stepped into the ring and began performing the same pirouettes, leaps, and graceful movements he had practiced in the dance studio. At a time when flamboyant wrestling personalities like Gorgeous George were already pushing the boundaries of showmanship, Starr's act still shocked audiences. The ballet dancer gimmick flirted with femininity in an era when professional wrestling was dominated by tough, masculine brawlers. Yet Starr approached the act with a wink of humor rather than vanity. He twirled around confused opponents, mocked their aggression, and delivered perfectly timed ballet-style kicks to strategic and often humiliating parts of the body. Starr once said, "I'd always wanted to get into show business. I took up ballet because an actor advised me, 'You gotta be able to do everything, kid. Sing, dance, act.'" Starr took that advice to heart. Even as his career began to take off, and he rode a wave of publicity and box office success, he continued paying for ballet lessons to refine the act that had made him famous. His growing popularity eventually caught the attention of Vincent J. McMahon, who signed Starr to a 4-year contract with Capital Wrestling, the company that would later evolve into the WWE. Starr quickly became a major attraction in the territory. By 1957, Starr's unusual mix of comedy, athleticism, and showmanship had won over even the toughest critics. What began as an unlikely experiment, combining ballet with professional wrestling, had turned Ricki Starr into one of the most distinctive and entertaining performers of the era. From 1957 to 1962, Starr was one of the most unique attractions in professional wrestling, touring across the United States and drawing crowds wherever he went. Promoter Jack Pfeffer recognized Starr's value immediately and booked him from arena to arena, presenting him as a must-see spectacle. Night after night, fans packed venues, not just to watch a wrestling match, but to witness something completely different. As Starr danced his way to the ring and twirled around bewildered opponents, he would toss miniature ballet slippers into the crowd, sending fans into a frenzy. Behind the scenes, he trusted Pfeffer to carefully select opponents who understood his style and were willing to play along with the performance. The act required timing, cooperation, and a willingness to be the butt of the joke, something not every wrestler was comfortable with. But those who worked with Starr quickly recognized his value. He wasn't just a novelty, he was a draw. Among his peers, Starr earned a great deal of respect. Wrestling legend Lou Thesz once praised him, saying, "Ricki Starr was one hell of a wrestler. He could go. He was one hell of a competitor. He was one hell of a party man too." Although Starr never captured a major championship, he didn't need one. His character was the attraction. Instead of chasing titles, he stayed constantly on the move, traveling from territory to territory to keep his act fresh and in demand. In doing so, Ricki Starr proved that in professional wrestling, charisma and creativity could be just as powerful as any championship belt, and far more unforgettable. As the 1960s progressed, the landscape of professional wrestling began to shift. Vincent J. McMahon started positioning Buddy Rogers as his new marquee attraction, and Ricki Starr, never one to stay confined to a single role, began looking beyond the ring. The same desire for show business that had led him to ballet years earlier now pulled him toward broader entertainment opportunities. Starr recorded a song titled "Shooting Star" and even made appearances on the popular television show Mr. Ed, where he played both a wrestler and, in a comedic twist, a bashful beautician. His performances were so well received that CBS director Arthur Lubin announced plans for a potential television series starring Starr during the 1963 season. But just as his career seemed poised to expand into mainstream entertainment, Starr once again reinvented himself. He partnered with Paul Lincoln Promotions in England and moved his act overseas, where he would spend much of the remainder of his career. Always evolving, Starr eventually abandoned the ballet dancer persona that made him famous, adopting a completely different character inspired by a Far Eastern gimmick, complete with a shaved head, top knot, and Fu Manchu mustache. It was a far cry from the pirouetting showman who had once dazzled American audiences, but it reflected Starr's constant need to adapt and perform. By the late 1970s, Starr quietly stepped away from professional wrestling altogether. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he chose not to remain connected to the business or relive his past glories. In the years that followed, fans frequently asked, "Where is he now?" A question that echoed across early internet forums and message boards. On September 20th, 2014, Starr passed away in London at the age of 83 after a brief illness. In many ways, his story ends just as uniquely as it was lived, without fanfare, without nostalgia, and without a final curtain call. Yet his legacy remains unmistakable. Long before wrestling fully embraced spectacle and character-driven performance, Ricki Starr proved that the ring could be a stage, and that sometimes the most effective way to defeat an opponent wasn't through force, but through style, creativity, and just a little bit of dance.